Welcome to Have You Heard, where we talk about issues at the intersection of agriculture and engineering. Let's get started. Here are your hosts, Morgan Hayes and Josh Jackson.
Welcome. This is the Have You Heard podcast. This is episode 59. We're going to talk today a little bit about digging ditches.
Oh, yeah. Good stuff.
Yeah. And I'm Morgan Hayes, an assistant professor in Biosystems and Ag Engineering here at the University of Kentucky, focusing on livestock facilities. And in my personal life, I farm in Boyle County, Kentucky with my husband, a commercial cattle and hay operation.
And I'm Josh Jackson, assistant professor in Biosystems and Agriculture Engineering as well, where I focus on precision livestock farming. And in my personal life, I raise vegetarian cattle and also have some goats as well and do some hay production.
Okay, Josh. So we've missed a couple weeks. I've had some personal stuff happening, and you can still hear a little bit of it in my voice. And I've just been avoiding recording just for everyone's benefit of not hearing me cough continuously.
So I guess as far as what's happened on the farm, it's been pretty much everything. So actually, this weekend we're synchronized up to breed cows this weekend. And then we're mostly pretty much done with our first cutting of hay. There's a couple of places we hadn't cut just because it's so thin this year. If you didn't fertilize, it didn't do anything. So there's a couple of places we still have to cut, but we'll probably just hit it a little bit before July 4th, and we might have some Johnson grass hopefully come up. Got a little bit of rain here, so it had been fairly dry. We're getting somewhat concerned. We sold a little bit of hay, kind of holding on to some others. And then have been taking kids to sheep shows, and then pretty much we had most of our hay equipment going, but one tractor is down and out. So that kind of put us in a little bit of bind. Had to hire some bush hogging done. A little bit of everything, and everybody's calved, although we did lose one. We had one with twins, and we lost one because another cow kicked in the head.
Oh, no. Yeah, that's part of having calves. Not very smart.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's just part of life. So
it's a challenge you got to do.
Yeah. Yeah, we've had our calving season obviously ended as well. We have a water line we put in, which sort of led into today's talk. And we also have all of our first cutting of hay done. Thank goodness we got that done. That was a relief for everyone, I think.
Yep.
And other than that, we have animals to feed, animals to rotate. We're working through. So you had all of your fly tags in. We have one group left that still needs tags, vaccines, things like that. But our first set of shots actually got into our groups of calves that are on the ground for spring. So
okay,
everything's doing pretty good.
Yeah, we were able to tattoo some of our, just because when we had them up to do some of this work, it's like, let's go ahead and tattoo them. I know it takes a while, but it's, one of those things with pain in the butt now or pain in the butt later. So
yeah. We've actually had a couple eye issues, which is why we've been really focused on getting fly tags and everything. But we had a calf actually earlier this week that had a bad eye. And we ended up roping it rather than sending it all the way to the front to get it worked.
Yep.
I grabbed the rope, wrapped it on the back of the four-wheeler so I had some leverage to hold it. And it pulled really good, and I hit my knee into the back of the four-wheeler, into the exhaust pipe. So now I have a good second-degree burn on my knee. Gosh. So on top of sounding like I'm dying here, I also am like injured. I'm living a very tough life. This is not my month, I don't think, but I'm hoping this month it turns around for me.
Calf gave you exhaust. Calf gave you exhaust.
In an ironic twist of fate, I have like two circles. Like everyone talks about like crop circles and things like that and how they look really weird and all the stuff about aliens that are out there right now on the news cycle. But like my knee looks like I have a spaceship on it because I've got these weird circles that are kind of counter to each other because it should have two round circles on the exhaust pipe, a narrower one and a larger one. But the way that things work on a farm is that they get dented in. So I have one circle and then another circle that's sort of on a different angle. So it looks like an alien spaceship on my knee right now. and probably for the rest of my life, it's probably going to scar that way, which is embarrassing and funny and a little bit of everything. So
I guess load up on the aloe, I guess, and hopefully
Yeah, I've got lots of Neosport on it. It's doing okay. It's just sort of ironic and funny at the same time. So
Good old exhaust hot brand.
Yeah, that's me.
Huh.
Yeah, so I mean, it's been a busy couple weeks on the farm. It's kind of crazy to have not actually been on recording for that couple weeks, but I think it's a perfect time and a perfect segue into our topic, which is digging ditches. And I sort of pushed for this topic today because we had this water line dug for us, and they actually put in the pipe, but we're still going to put in the tank ourselves. But we hired out part of the work, and I was really happy with our decision. We hired out a rock saw
Yep.
to come in and do the cutting. And I know there are a couple different options on there, so why don't you lay out what those are?
So, we've used a rock saw before as well. And one primary benefit we saw right off the bat was when it came through, we'd had a backhoe out there, and we had our own backhoe. We were digging, it was taking a little bit of time. And one of the challenges with the backhoe is sometimes you got a big rock, and then he's right in your path. And so to get him out, you have to dig a bigger hole sometimes, and you have to dig. The other challenge with the backhoe is you can have a narrow bucket, but you're digging a much bigger hole than you have with the rock saw. Rock saw gives you kind of an adequate depth, maybe 30 inches, and you're just as straight as can be, which it breaks up all your rocks and puts a little bit of soil to the side. Your backhoe, you got a pretty big pile. Sometimes you still got those bigger rocks in there, and so that can still be a challenge that you may have to remove before you fill that hole back in.
Yeah. Yeah, those bigger rock pieces are really a challenge because you don't want to pack them back in right around that pipe that you just laid in the especially because the ground underneath it's not very solid either. So you don't want to push down on the pipe if the ground underneath it isn't going to support it.
Yep.
The rock saw puts maybe a 4-inch wide cut with the dirt coming out to both sides, but there's not a lot of dirt really that you're pushing back into the pile or into the hole, which is nice. The backhoes are nice, especially the mini backhoes are pretty efficient. And sometimes you can even straddle with those to get things the way you want them. Certainly if you're running multiple lines, like if you're running for a new farmstead, water and power, in theory they're not supposed to be in the same hole, but sometimes they get placed in the same hole anyway.
For us, we use mini excavators as well. During some like where you think there's good soil, they work fairly well, but sometimes you get those big rocks that can overpower them fairly easily.
That's exactly right. And here in Kentucky, we have plenty of rocks. So that is the one challenge with them is that once you hit rock, you still have a lot of work to do in another way.
Yep. They do work effectively, and you can get like, ones that are stronger, ones that have extension arm.
Right.
They seem to be somewhat helpful, but yeah, when we get down to it, the backhoe, usually you can power through some of those bigger rocks.
Yeah.
Or I can definitely take them out and go around them. But, the rock saw around here seem to be a lot. And it's just it looks like a big circular saw. I mean, it's about 6-8 foot diameter saw. And so you take it, you drop it in the soil, and it just does its work and just eats it. It's got those carbide tips.
Yep.
And it just eats up those rocks. And, I think back in the day, it was $2 a foot, and it was probably about the same for the backhoe. But it was a lot faster, left you with less of a mess. And I think, for us, it almost seemed to be a no-brainer just to kind of use that just because it was quicker, easier to fill back in. And, hiring that done, I think was a good decision. Usually within RCS, they kind of know where we were in the county, how we're going to have more rocks, kind of budgeted in for that in the project as well.
Yeah, I think that's true. And right now, NRCS projects sometimes are struggling a little bit to match the cost of doing business just because prices have escalated pretty rapidly in the last year or two. But certainly, I think there's opportunities to use different things to dig the ditches. We typically fill our own ditches back in. And one of our goals is always to fill all the dirt that came out back into the hole and leave it slightly mounded so that as it settles, that mound will allow for enough dirt that it will level back out. And if someone has never done this before and never had to engage with a group who's putting in water lines for you, this is a really important part of the process to actually make sure that does happen, because I've seen a number of people and on farms that we lease or we cut hay on for shares or things like that, that someone will come and put in a water line on one of their farms, and they'll take all the dirt above and beyond a level surface. They'll push dirt back into the hole with a skid steer or something and then scrape all the extra and take it. I don't know where they're taking it to, and I'm sure they didn't ask before they did it. But it's really important that dirt belongs back in that hole. If it all came out of the hole, it all belongs back in that hole because you've only added a very small pipe
Yep.
into that hole. So you really don't want to lose any dirt.
Everything settles, and you got a gully for the
Yep.
water to travel.
And we have one farm that we cut for hay, and the plumber put in the water line. And this is not a judgment on this particular plumber. I think in general plumbers are not as strong at putting in large water lines outside. It's just not probably part of their favorite skill set. But they want to leave the ground looking right, so they will level everything out when they're done, and then we end up with these huge ditches, which end up rilling. Rilling is a term for when the ground starts to erode out as you go down a hillside. And it starts with just a little bit of dirt loss, and then eventually you end up with these large ditches that you have to literally drive over and bounce your equipment over. And it's dangerous. We actually don't cut the hay where the water line is. We cut with the water line so that we don't damage our equipment. And then we come in and bush hog afterwards just to clean up that water line. That's the only way that we can manage it because it was put in incorrectly, I guess.
Yep. And we do a lot of our, just because, some of the costs, we did a lot of our own for a number of years as well. We backfilled a lot of our own as well. So a lot of it was like, we just piled it back up and said, good enough for government work, and then came back in it, and it settled over time.
Yeah. And sometimes we've pushed some in and they haven't settled well, and we've driven over them like a month or two later, and then we've re-pushed up. For anyone who has a skid steer, that's one of the benefits of having a skid steer on site, is that you have the ability to kind of rework that dirt a couple times if you need to. But if you have a smaller cut opening and you've pushed it up well, a lot of times you can get away with just one time and really get the ground back in the shape you want it in.
And for us, we also, because we, the one line we used just the backhoe, and so we had set a lot of the big rocks kind of just to the side of it. We still scraped our dirt in, set a lot, and then came back through, kind of smoothed it out after a couple months, and then picked up all of our big rock.
Yeah. What did you end up doing with all those big rocks?
Plenty of sinkholes. There's plenty of sinkholes, and they're never going to be filled. So
there you go. Yeah, we actually have some sinkholes we could use some rocks in right now too. I have a couple on my farm that have opened up in the last month or two, which is kind of a surprise because we've had a fairly dry spring, but just this last rainfall, we just drove around and I said, "Oh, there's another one that's opening up," which is frustrating, but also just part of life.
That's just part of it, and you hope they stay small, but so usually they go from about the size of a tractor wheel to eating the tractor, kind of.
That's true. And some of these are small enough right now, nothing would get in them, but I could come back next spring and I could have a calf in one of them, and it would be an exciting day for us. So
we've done that before. It is an exciting day.
Yeah, I know. It's never a good day when that happens. So, but
I guess, and so we talked about rock saw seem to work good, excavator. What do y'all use for pipe? I've used in the past PVC. Think about maybe in the future switching maybe possibly to PEX. Throwing it as a water line.
We use 1.5 and 2 inch PVC pipe. I'm the black pipe, the HDPE black pipe. The rolls of it are nice in the sense that you get a long distance between a connection. The challenge is the connections are not, in my opinion, quite as strong as the connections you can get on a good PVC glue connection in the ground. I don't think that they're going to fail with any regularity. In fact, we had old black pipe on one of our farms, and it was 35 years old, and it for the most part it had no issues other than 1 or 2 blowouts right at the very beginning. But when the blowouts come, it's a lot of work to find them, and it's a little bit more challenging to manage that black pipe. It's definitely not quite as structurally sound if there's a lot of rock and other things like that. The PVC is a little bit more robust. So we tend to use the PVC as our primary line, and then we use PEX anywhere where we're coming off of it.
Okay.
PEX makes really nice connections off of the PVC. So where we go up into our tank, we will put a valve outside of our heavy use area where our water tanks sit.
Yep.
Hopefully near a fence line or near somewhere where it's sort of out of the way, so that we have our valve accessible away from the tank. So if there is a leak, we don't have to get into the leaking water tank to get the water off. But then what we can end up doing is bringing our PEX all the way up out of the ground, all the way up to the valve up at the top, through that the earth tube that we typically would put under our water tank.
Okay.
So we have no breaks in that line from that valve to
Right.
where the brass or plastic or whatever connection we have on our float is.
So if there was an issue, you can turn it off.
We have an off valve there, and then we can work on whatever we need to. But because there's no break in the line through the earth tube or anywhere else under the heavy use area, we in theory won't have to dig up. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's sort of the intention or the goal that we have with that.
And on a couple of ours, we've actually put in we actually put in a T on some, like we've had a T put in there as well, just so, and we ran it out so far, then ended it.
Yep.
And put a little tube there, just so like, all right, if we ever need to tap into this or do something else on that farm, we just tap into that line we ran that T off of.
Yep.
Go from there.
I think that's a great plan.
So we were just trying to do that for just future versatility, to some degree. I think what else we've done with our lines, trying to be, and the tire tanks, I guess we primarily use just the 90 degree. We still use PVC and 90 degree, then switch to stainless steel.
Oh yeah, that is useful to have something more robust in a tire tank, just because
we have that, put the concrete around that.
Yep.
So we usually use the PVC, then comes up and switches to stainless steel, and then go from pretty much just run to stainless steel valve.
That's a great idea.
So seems worked thus far. I mean, it's been fairly resilient.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like it. I like it because we've got the kind where you just blow all the water out. If it's dirty, cleans it out, then you just screw everything back together and you're good to go.
That's nice. That's a really useful thing, because one of the things you will find is that just with having all of that water line, that you do have a buildup of certain debris over time. And certainly at your furthest tank out or the longest end, you have to have some form of a clean out at the end. We, in addition to having valves outside of each tank, we have a couple valves in our main line, in our main trunk of our water line. So if we're thinking there's an issue, we can actually test by turning off a couple of different valves in our main line to see if we get the leak out. So we don't have to check every tank individually. We can go, oh, look, our back 5 fields are off and it's still going. That's not those tanks. Then we can come back and turn off the next set and say, oh, it's not in these 3. Oh, now we have to just check the front 2. Or, oh, it's in those 3 between. Just so we have like a little bit more control and easier time checking and looking, because we do have a number of water tanks. I know some people are able to get away with 1, but our farm is, at least some of our farms are narrower and longer.
And so it
just means more water tanks to make the walking distances work.
Yeah, we kind of use a similar strategy. We have multiple, but we put 3 in, we only know where 2 are. So it's we meant to mark one of those things. We meant to mark number 2, and then it's like, okay, we're going to leave this hole open. Then it got to be close to winter time, and the other brother just took and just dumped all the dirt on top of it. It's like, well, it's better covered than frozen. So
I can understand that. We actually covered. We put a valve in when we put in this new water line, just to make sure that, with it being so hot, that we didn't leave cows without water for any significant length of time, in case they weren't able to get done on that first day. And so we buried that one, and I actually just used my phone, took a screenshot of the Google map with the location on it, literally just standing over top of it, and texted it to my husband. We'll put it onto our Google Earth file that we have, which I think is a great option. So if you're not familiar with that, I would strongly encourage anyone listening to, if you're farming, use your phone.
Yes.
As the GPS advantage that you have. It's not the most perfect one, but it works pretty well.
It's within 15 feet.
In fact, I went and marked the water line so that they would know where to dig, knowing they were going to try and break it. They were going to try and cut through it. And the phone did a perfect job of identifying the location. Unfortunately, I didn't have my flag. I walked back down to get the flag and went back up to put it up. and instead of being between the two posts that I wanted to on the fence line, I ended up down one set of posts. So they started dragging at the angle, and they were like, "We're not going to hit it. What did you do?" And then I made a mistake. The GPS on the phone worked just fine. It was just me, user error right there, doing a really inadequate job is what I was doing.
Things happen.
But they caught it. They caught it. They just had to drive a little further out from the fence than they were expecting to catch that water line the way it went through.
Huh.
So just a small error on my part.
Yeah, things happen. A little 5 feet here or there will get you sometimes. A little 5 feet.
Yeah, I mean, it's only like 28 feet between posts, so I was only off by about 20 feet
28 feet.
On my not on the measurement. Actually, the GPS was completely right because it's
just
almost exactly right. It was just that I personally, when I went counting back up the hill with the flag, I
just
miscounted the number of
you get to walk
spaces
along
I was going. Yep, close enough. That's
close enough.
Well, not really close enough though.
All right, so I think we covered some of the bases. So rock saw, excavator, backhoe.
Yep.
Anything else we need to cover on the water lines, you think? Or
no, I think that's probably a pretty good thing. The only thing I think we didn't touch on at all is if you sleeve yours if you go under heavy. Do you worry about the rocks and protecting your pipes at all?
We worry about them, but we usually try to set all the big ones to the side,
Okay.
like I mentioned, and we don't. We thought about at some point putting some gravel over down and over around, but we thought about it, and that's probably about as far as it went. I guess if it was really, really, really rocky, we probably would do something like that. It's going to be really bad, that aspect. But probably if it was that bad, we'd probably just use a rock saw and then just hopefully have all that smaller material to put back in there. No, we use the PVC pipe, ones that have the bell at the end and slide over them. That seems to work. That's 2 inch and an inch and a half, similar to what you use.
Yep.
20-foot sections. That seems to work fairly good. Google Earth, just to measure Google Earth or clicky base map, or just Google Maps and measure how much distance we have on a water line.
Yeah. We don't do a lot of sleeving either, although we have one or two driveways that when we have to go underneath a couple of them, just because of the type of traffic on them and the amount of rock that's there, older driveways that have been sort of over time built up, not properly built with a filter fabric layer, but just people add rock every couple of years. And a couple of those we have actually sleeved just to protect, because we know we have so much rock in those areas, and not big rock, but just little pointier rocks. So other than that, though, we tend to be like you. We don't tend to sleeve very much, and we tend to prefer the rock saw. So we don't tend to have a lot of large rock pieces that we're pushing back down in the hole with our water line.
Not about those, knock on wood, so far so good.
Yeah.
As far as 10 years in.
There you go. So, with that, let's just give a quick update on what's happening on the farm this next week.
So this next week, like I said, we're going to be sinking some cows this weekend. So sinking those cows up, probably, just doing a little bit of like minor repairs on some hay equipment, and then pretty much getting ready to go do a 4th of July cut, and probably cut a couple places that I said, man, they're okay at this point. Maybe a little short on hay. We'll go ahead and cut those places.
Yeah.
So the hillsides, I was like, I don't like that hillside. Now it's like, it's not that bad. Quit being a pansy.
I need the hay.
Need the hay.
Yeah, I will say that anything that we fertilized did okay. We didn't have exceptional yields this spring, but we didn't have terrible yields this spring. But the one or two places that we did not fertilize were not nearly as strong, which is that's just the nature of not spending the money, right? So
I am halfway tempted. If it rains, I'm halfway tempted to throw a little bit of nitrogen.
Yeah.
If it rains.
We may throw some nitrogen down on a couple places. So we actually put a little bit of secondary nitrogen down on one of our main hay fields, and it's come back and looks really good. So
we've got a hay field hayfield / pasture we use. And I was like, well, if worst case scenario, it turns into hayfield, gets good yield, turns to hayfield, not. We just run cows in there as pasture.
So it'll be interesting to see what happens with the rest of the summer, because the weather's been fairly variable, I guess.
Yeah, it's
so
been
far.
dry. So we had that really good big dry spell, good for cutting, but then not really a lot of rain for growing. So
Exactly.
we'll see
And
what the summer brings.
we have one more farm we got to get bush hogging done on. We've got all the rest of our farms caught up on bush hogging at this point. So that's one of our goals for this week. Also, we lost on our baler, have sort of monitors on there that are basically just cables that measure the amount of hay on the two sides so you can make sure that they're even, and one of those cables broke. So my husband had to finish baling by instinct alone. And so we will get that fixed before we start our second cutting. So a little bit of maintenance and a little bit of bush hogging and a little bit of feeding animals and keeping everything going. Making sure the bulls are doing their job. Got to keep it.
Okay. Yep. Guess it is that time. So we're doing the same thing, getting ready to AI everybody, and then good luck, bulls, after that. So
That's right. They do their job. So
get our one and done for thinking.
there you go.
They get one shot of AI, then they're done.
I think that's a good plan.
All right, with that, end of today's podcast, I guess.
Okay. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next time.
Thanks.
Have You Heard is a production of the University of Kentucky College of Agriculture, Food and Environment, along with the Department of Biosystems and Agricultural Engineering. Discover what's wildly possible at ca.uky.edu.